afternoon session. If everyone could take a seat, and we'll get started in 7 seconds. All right, well, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to chair this afternoon's session on grid resiliency. My name is Mike Ross. I'm Senior Vice President for External Affairs and Stakeholder Relations at Southwest Power Pool. We're one of the 7 grid operators, regional transmission organizations in the United States, and we cover all our part of 14 states, stretching from Louisiana to the Canadian border, and really take in what I call the heartland of America. Prior to joining SPP, I had the privilege to spend 10 years in the Arkansas State Senate and 12 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Arkansas. Helped write the Energy Policy Act back in 2005, which is really the federal energy policy that continues to guide us today. Did that while serving on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So, to maintain a modernized grid system during this period of energy transition, utilities, power producers must focus on strengthening grid resilience, or the ability to minimize the consequences of extreme weather events or malicious physical or cyber attacks. Utility planners, power producers also must understand the consequences when specific threats emerge and prepare for them so that proper actions are taken to rebound from outages. Our future grid system must be flexible and adaptable, allowing an array of generation fuel types, from natural gas, coal, nuclear, solar, wind, to hydro, to coordinate functions, thereby ensuring reliability. As a grid operator, as someone that facilitates the wholesale electric market for 14 states, I can tell you, and we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, during the Q&A, but having a diversified fuel mix is absolutely critical to reliability and resiliency. A resilient system will include the capacity to harden the grid against and quickly recover from high-impact, low-frequency events like tornadoes, hurricanes, the winter weather event we had back in February, wildfires in certain regions of the country, and physical and cyber attacks. So this afternoon, I will ask our speakers to provide an overview to be followed by questions for me and you, the audience. So if you would please submit any written questions you have to Kimberly Gray or a member of the Southern States Energy Board staff. So let's get on with the program. I'm pleased to introduce our distinguished speakers. John Cronsky serves as Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of OG&E Energy Corp and OG&E. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, a Master of Business Administration degree from the University of South Carolina, and has completed the Advanced Management Program at the Harvard Business School. John serves on boards of the State Chamber of Oklahoma, Downtown OKC, United Way of Central Oklahoma, chairs the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, Children's Hospital Foundation, Oklahoma Hall of Fame, Oklahoma City Museum of Art, and the Myriad Botanical Gardens. And John, I got to say, you might have done too good a job this morning at breakfast when you had your chamber chairman hat on, encouraging people to get out and spend money in the city, because it looks like a few of them did. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to please join me in welcoming the CEO of OG&E Energy Corp and OG&E, John Cronsky.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here, and if you haven't had the opportunity to go out and spend money, please do that this afternoon. We appreciate that. Listen, just a real quick introduction to OG&E. We are the largest investment-owned utility in the state. We're fortunate to serve the largest city in the state of Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City. We're fortunate to serve the 3rd largest city in Arkansas, Fort Smith. And, you know, the way we think about our business is you can define your business in a number of different ways. You can look at it in terms of the megawatts you have, the number of renewable resources you have, the number of natural gas facilities you have, miles of distribution, transmission, whatever. The way we look at it is simply put, our communities grow. I like to say our business is only as strong as the communities in which we serve. So are those communities growing? And they are. We've worked really hard to get our rates to be the lowest in the country. And, so how do we do it? What are we doing? So what we do is we really focus on those things that really drive economic development in our communities. The idea that we want to attract people, attract businesses, attract customers to our service territory, make investments, and continue to spread those costs over a larger group of people. So as we think about it, click a few buttons, Todd. So how are we doing that? So you've heard us talk many times about, and Mike mentioned about reliability and resiliency, and that's the topic of today in terms of resiliency. Well, your core service offerings in terms of reliability. Everyone expects when you come into a room, flip the light switch, turn your air conditioner, whatever, things come on. And we're continually making the system more reliable, and so we continue to harden things. We're doing more investments underground. We actually have more capacity, transformer capacity today underground than we do above ground. You may not even recognize that or realize that. But more importantly, we're moving on to making it more resilient. And so resiliency is really how do you deal with adverse situations. And this discussion around resiliency is not just about weather. As we put more and more equipment out there, more and more sensors out there, this idea Mike mentioned it around cyber is real. And it's not an exaggeration to say the pings, the threats that come into our system every day are growing. They grow every day. And so you've got to make sure that your system's integrated and protected as we go forward. So what we do is we think about the automation of our distribution system, of our substations. We have sensors, devices that are actually capturing this data and giving us visual analytics in there where we can see what's happening on our system, how we can detect in advance concerns or faults occurring in our system, and how we protect that going forward. But I think the real change metric is really around these technology platforms. And so while you have sensors that capture this data, you've got to have a communication network that actually transmits that data. And so we've historically in this industry thought about communications network as a cost of doing business. Well, today it's vitally important because you've got to be able to manage that data in real-time situations and react to situations as they occur. And so that's where we're spending a lot of our investment time today. We've made some significant investments. We've announced some partnerships with local companies, basically conducting, expanding our fiber route, improving our own system, but more importantly, allowing them to create that last mile of broadband service to a lot of those rural communities in which we serve. We also had, we've made these investments, and so we've been doing this for about 3 years in Arkansas. So and what I want to share with you is we're actually seeing those results. So the number of outages, if you think about the duration of these outages, these circuits where we've made investments, it's about half the time. And so we had a major storm come through earlier this year, and the duration of the outages was decreased, but more importantly, the number of customers impacted were also decreased. So these investments are paying off, but that's just on business. We also might use the words flexible and agile. That's why everything needs to be in our system, whether it's on the distribution service, whether it's on transmission, or even on the supply side and generation. We've got a lot more flexible assets that line up well with our renewable resources to make sure the system is more reliable, more resilient, and what I call more responsive to the needs of our customers. So with that, Mike, I'll stop. Turn over to Peggy.
Thanks, Sean. It's now my pleasure to introduce Peggy Simmons, President and Chief Operating Officer of the Public Service Company of Oklahoma, where her responsibilities include all aspects of electric service for PSO's more than 550,000 customers. Peggy has held numerous roles of increasing responsibility with American Electric Power, AEP, parent company of Public Service Company. Prior to her current role, she was Managing Director of Transmission and Asset Strategy, responsible for transmission strategy and policy, regulatory support, siting, and rights of way for transmission projects. Peggy earned a bachelor's degree in economics from The Ohio State University and a master's degree in public policy and administration from Central Michigan University. She serves on the board of trustees for the Tulsa Performing Arts Center Trust and Tulsa Community Foundation, the board of directors for the Tulsa Regional Chamber and State Chamber of Oklahoma, on the board of BOK Financial Corporation, Tulsa Area United Way, Oklahoma Nonprofit Excellence Commissioner. Peggy, welcome. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you very much for that introduction, Mike, and I'm very pleased to be on the stage here with George and Sean to talk about a topic that really connects all of us. Power is one of the most vital things in our daily lives, and resiliency and the reliability of the grid is what enables that to happen. So PSO has been providing power to customers in Oklahoma ever since 1889 when Vanello Electric Ice and Power was chartered, and now we're serving over 500,000 customers in the state, over 230 plus cities and towns with 1,600 team members dedicated to serving our customers. And we are, as you can see from the slide here, we are part of a larger, the AEP system, and that does come with a lot of benefits and resources, whether it's from being able to call on our brothers and sisters across the United States to be able to come in to restore power, whether it's from the expertise from cyber and physical security, and we actually have one of our experts, I believe, on one of the panels either today or tomorrow, or it's just from learning from best practices or learning from other RTOs. AEP is in 4 regional transmission organizations. PSO is in SPP. I think that it's no surprise to anyone that the energy industry is transforming pretty rapidly. And there are a lot of drivers that are causing that to happen. And one of those is the voice of our customer. Our customers are asking for more input into where the generation is coming from that's supplying their homes and their businesses. They want to know more about the outages and their usage of their energy on a daily basis. And we have technology such as our mobile alerts so that we can respond to them proactively and in real time about when their power will be back on. Not only is that driving some of this transformation, we also have the generation transformation. From going from more centralized generation to more localized generation, getting a lot closer to the distribution grid and the types of generation. We have retirements that are happening because of the environmental controls and the cost of that. So we do have one of our last coal fire plants that are going to be retiring. We're bringing on some new renewables, and one of those facilities that actually came on earlier this year, our North Central Wind Facility. But we're adding that to the existing 3,000 plus megawatts of natural gas generation that we have and will continue to have to support our customers. So then we also have the accommodations of the grid. So that is talking about whether it's the weather impacts that we're seeing or how individuals are interacting with the grid. And then we have policy and regulations that we have to address as well. So then all of this is underpinned by the advancement of technology, which is driving and facilitating a lot of this change. And some of that technology, we'll start to move on to the next slide. Some of that technology is related to how we interact with the grid. So that grid intelligence that we're able to get, so it's looking at situational awareness, looking at automated controls. We have over 50% of our stations have, and circuits have distribution automated controls put onto them, and that's what we've been investing in because what it allows for the grid to do is essentially to self-heal. So if something happens on one circuit, we don't have to go out there, we can go ahead and the power reverts to another circuit until we're able to get that one addressed. So then from there, we talk about all these challenges that we're seeing and it's impacting the resiliency of the grid. And it's weather, it's the bulk system, the age of the system that we have. We know that weather is one of the #1 causes of outages for the distribution system. We've seen that whether it was in October of 2020 or even most recently in February of this year, where we had a very significant event that we had to be able to respond to. But what we have to also do is invest in our system at the transmission and the distribution level so that we are able to better respond to and restore quickly power to our customers. So that's where we have the revitalization. We have to also be able to have those spare parts that are available, those transformers that we need in those times of emergencies. And Grid Assurance is a subscriber-based program that AEP is a part of, as well as many other utilities, to be able for transformers to be available in these times of emergencies. So I talked about the transformation of the industry and things that are happening. And so you think about what needs to be done, and I said some things about transmission and the distribution level, and we know that it's being impacted, whether it's by the change in the resource mix, whether it's by the economy, electrification of the economy, and what that's changing to demand and load patterns, or these extreme weather events. And so a couple of things that can be done or considered is on more coordination, more forward thinking on how we're planning the transmission system, thinking more scenario planning that's going to take in some of these extreme weather type events. Some other things is the import capability. We know during February, SPP was getting power in from some of the neighboring RTOs. So if some more of that transport capability can be wide, it can help in being able to restore power quickly during these extreme weather events, as well as thinking about how the maintenance and outage times. So whenever you are thinking about if you're planning the system and you're saying that there's an issue, and if we're saying, okay, this plant or something can't be available, maybe we need to expand that a little bit more and say, what if X, Y, and Z aren't available? What does that look like? And these are just some of the things that we can start to consider and help us as we're starting to allow for our grid to be more resilient. And so as I close this part, I just want to say, we're excited to be here and talking with the industry, talking with political leaders such as yourselves on how we can continue to focus on our customers and provide them safe and reliable power. Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy, and to wrap up our panel, I'm pleased and delighted to introduce George Papadimitriou, the CEO of Enel Green Power North America. George, thank you for being with us today. I hope I did not butcher your last name too badly. I was up late practicing. George has served as the head of North America for EGP since September of 2018. He joined EGP in 2008 and was appointed to various roles such as the head of regulatory affairs for Europe, country manager of EGP France, head of EGP Business Development Europe, head of EGP Business Development Latin America. He's been around. His professional career has evolved exclusively within the energy sector at international levels in a series of countries and companies such as Scottish Power, Fortum, Yuan, Gazprom, and Contour Global. George studied engineering at the National Technical University of Athens, received a bachelor's degree in economics from the American College of Greece, and a master's in operational research from the University of Strathclyde, Glasgow. It's my pleasure to welcome George to the podium.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. We're Enel, and in the United States and Canada, Enel is an IPP, but globally is one of the biggest utilities in the world. And we're very proud to be today here in Oklahoma, because basically in Oklahoma is where the Enel Green Power North America heart beats, and I'll explain that in a second. So Enel is an Italian global utility. We've got 70 million utility customers across the world in 31 countries. We've got 66,000 employees. We've got 50 gigawatts of renewable capacity that makes us the largest private renewable energy operator in the world. That represents about 55% of our total installed capacity. We've got about 85 gigawatts of total installed capacity. pioneer in demand response, 7.4 gigawatts of demand response worldwide, and we're pledged to decarbonize completely by 2050 at an asymptotic, let's say, rate, with already committed decommissioning of coal power plants in Italy, Chile, and Spain. We're involved, Enel is involved in all, let's say, phases of the spectrum of a utility business. Power generation, for sure, and that's what I represent here in the United States. Global infrastructure and networks, which is basically the distribution business. Energy and commodity management, which is managing the positions that created from our retail customers, as you see there, but also from our generation to be able to optimize its value. And Enel, last but not least, are, let's say, boutique energy transition business line that focuses on customer solutions to enable them to be part of the energy transition. And Enel Green Power in North America, that's for North America, the slide is, we're based in Boston for historical reasons, but we're very heavy in the state of Oklahoma. And if I count very roughly between Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, we've got over 65% of our installed capacity. We're present in 14 states, 20 terawatt hours of electricity, a lot of construction jobs. We're building right now about 2 gigawatts we've got about 1.5 under construction as we speak of renewable energy capacity, and we've got 6.7 gigawatts of installed capacity, renewable, solar, wind, and geothermal. And we're investing in, just to give you a ballpark, in the United States, Enel Green Power North America in USA and Canada represents about 1/3 to 1/4 of the global business plan of Enel in renewables, and that translates in a number between 1 to 2 billion euros every year. And that number is set to increase. And as I said, we are a company that we're based in Boston, but we became what we are by investing in Oklahoma. We've got a huge presence in Oklahoma, in Missouri, and very recently now in Texas. So our focus, coming to the point, and I'll conclude my intro. Our focus today is grid resiliency, and from our side, as an IPP in the United States, what we see is storage, transmission, and not least, what we do, make sure that we do best what we do, which is generate as much power as we can, and make sure that we don't miss a blow of wind, we don't miss a ray of sun, make sure that we are very well protected from cyber threats, and that's for sure one thing that we're doing. Focusing on storage, however, very recently, our business plan has paired all our new investments with storage. So regardless of whether they're wind or whether they're solar, right now we have a 1 gigawatt plan to have installed storage capacity by the end of next year. Already 600 megawatts of those are under construction. About 200 of those are under operation already since a few months. So we see a great value. We saw before, I don't know who was in the lunch. We saw the CEO of Nikola explaining us let's say, where the gray part of the chart, that is, where is the needed demand in a world that has a lot of renewable space. It's clear that 2-3 hours a day are required require high storage for us. We're making sure every investment that we're doing, we're studying to have storage at least for 20% of its installed capacity. And that, together with our own, let's say, focus on the operation of those power plants, gives us the responsibility of being the best actors as far as electricity production is concerned, to make sure that whenever we have the opportunity to store power, we store it, and of course we make it available for the hours that the resource is not there, but not least, we make use of the storage, of the electricity storage, to provide ancillary services for the grid operators. I'm happy to discuss more and during the Q&A about what we do. Once again, thank you very much. a great honor to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, George. And is Kimberly Gray in the room? These lights we can't really see. Is anyone from the Southern States Energy Board staff?
Yeah, I'll fix it.
Can you, yeah, back here, just raise your hand if you would again. Yeah, so if you've got a question, because we can't really see you, so if you've got a question, please let her know and we'll make sure that we get to it at least until 2:30. And I've been told that's the dead stop time. So we're going to get started and get through as much of this as we can. So, you know, I was listening to your presentations today. I couldn't help but think about weather-related events, climate-related events that we used to consider 100-year events. It seems like they're happening more and more often. We see wildfires, primarily in the West, but wildfires, hurricanes. It's been a tough year, especially for Louisiana and a few other states. And then, you know, we're in Tornado Alley, if you will, through much of the SPP region, your service areas. And so are we starting to think more about how we've made the system more resilient to deal with these weather events, try to minimize the amount of time that, you know, our customers go without power? You know, we had the winter weather event in February, which we got pretty lucky and dodged a bullet compared to Texas, but we still had issues, obviously. So, you know, as CEOs, as leaders of your companies, and of course, Peggy and Sean, they're vertically integrated utilities, they're load serving entities, and George, you know, is a independent power producer. But I'd love from all three of you, maybe starting with Peggy, you know, what does the future look like in terms of how we plan for these type of events that used to be rare and now seem to be becoming more common?
Oh, my mic is on. All right. Great question. I think I touched on that a little bit in my intro and overview. I mean, if we look back in May of 2019, I think 2019 Oklahoma had the most tornadoes, which I recently moved to Oklahoma in 2018. So I found that interesting. And then in May, I think there was like 60 tornadoes. There was an earthquake. We had historic floods. So I think it's real that there's a lot more weather events that are happening that are impacting our system. And some of those things that I think we just need to continue to do is to be able to invest in the distribution and transmission system, putting some of that technology on that, as I was sharing, that allows us with some more automation. I think we also need to start considering and thinking about some more of the scenario planning and situational awareness, taking into consideration in the planning part what some of these extreme weather events may have on the system, because things are changing, and then we just have to have more coordinated communication around that, because at the end of the day, our job is to keep the lights on for our customers, and when they go out, to get them back on as quickly as possible.
Yes. I'll echo Peggy on the transmission side, because it's one part of the equation that, of course, it adds to the reliability of the overall system, but it also adds to the possibility and the capability of IPPs like us to inject more power in the system, and of course make it available, make green power available for all consumers. As much as possible, and as much as the resource, the ample natural resource allows us. For us, I think, as I touched upon during my introduction, it's essential that first of all we do our job as best as we can. So we make sure that we don't lose a single megawatt hour, single kilowatt hour. For the solar side, you know, having bifacial solar panels, we saw, for instance, when it snows, it was like. The fact that they get hit up very quickly, the snow melts, it was something that, you know, a problem that we used to have for solar panels, now we don't have. We having, as Sean touched upon the digitalization, for us, being able, we realize that we have access problems. You certain areas. You never thought that then you're going to be snowed away, snowed out from certain parts of your power plant. So having digitalized everything, being able, because in the past you used to have to go somewhere to reset something, right? You did that in some the distribution system or the production system. Now we're making sure that we have everything digitalized, and not least what I said before, storage. Investment in storage right now makes absolute economic sense. So pairing renewables with storage is the way forward. If we want to see the transition, picking up at the pace that people want to see it, you will have to introduce storage across the value chain. And we as IPPs, we're making sure that we're studying our projects with storage next to it. But as a utility, we are talking about other business lines that I've touched upon before. We're making sure that we have storage available across the value chain, distribution, at the transmission system, and at least at the level of the consumers behind the meter.
Yeah, I would just add that, if you look in particular in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and you know this as well as anybody with your position at the pool, it was almost like lockdown. You expect to have tornado outbreaks late May, or late April, May, and early June. You expect the summers to be hot and dry. And, the winter time, the wind would blow in the spring and fall, and at night during the winter. But if you take a step back, and Peggy mentioned this, the summers have been milder, they've been wetter. We've had a lot more rain than we're accustomed to. Maybe not enough in some places, but still more than we were accustomed to. But we've had more events in the winter over the last 4 or 5 years than we've had previously. And so, what are the implications here? Well, we've designed, built, and maintained our systems really for that hot, dry summer. That summer month when it's 100 degrees outside, and all the industry, everything's running. You're not, And if you go back to February with Winter Storm Uri, we saw peak loads during that period of time that really looked a whole lot like what we normally see in August. And so that causes you to really think about how you design and operate your system going forward. And so you talk about more transmission, more flexible and adaptable resources that really can respond to changing market conditions. Because, if you think about it, having that service during the summer is one thing. Everyone wants air conditioning. But when it's sub-zero outside, that's a different ballgame. And you need to make sure your system's there. And so in these times of uncertainty, you want options. So you want to make sure you have different pathways in terms of transmission to wield that power. You want to make sure you have flexible and adaptive resources to really respond to those changing market dynamics. And then the physical assets that deliver that service to that home business, they've got to be reliable, they've got to be resilient, they've got to be responsive to those customers' needs.
Yeah, and I'll just add, related to the winter weather that back in February, that was our first time as a grid operator. We're the ones that direct the load serving entities to curtail power through a temporary controlled outage. If we don't do that, it can lead to cascading blackouts that can take days, if not weeks, to get the entire system back up and running, because it's just one very complex, gigantic machine of 800 generators, 70,000 miles of high voltage transmission lines. And we never want to make that call, but our grid operators are trained, heavily trained to make that call. It's the first time we had to make it in 80 years, and it was the perfect storm. And because we facilitate the wholesale electric market, we're fuel agnostic. So I'm not picking on any source here. I mean, we had problems with all the sources. We had coal piles that froze up. We had gas wells that froze up in the head. We didn't get gas in the pipelines to the generating plants. And then wind. Wind actually came in the forecast that day, but it wasn't one of the greater days. Sometimes we have 85% of the energy of the 14 states coming from wind. Sometimes we have 2%. And it came in the forecast, but then what happened is we did not, there was no precipitation during this event, right? So we didn't anticipate the wind turbines icing up. They iced up from fog. So that's something new that we're having to put into our forecasting now. It's not just freezing rain, but freezing fog that can ice them up. And so it was really like the perfect storm that happened, and we dodged the bullet. And when you look at Texas and others, but yeah, we had up to 6% of our region without power for up to 3 hours on February 16th. It was about 3% for about 50 minutes on February the 15th. But because we're interconnected with the other RTOs, we were able to actually get about 3,000 megawatts all the way from the East Coast to help us here, something that was more difficult for them to do in the ERCOT region in Texas. And so, thinking about that, we ended up about 3,000 megawatts short. That's 3,000 megawatts. That's about 6 large natural gas coal plants that would cost more than $1 billion a piece to build. So that's $6 billion to sit there that you might need once every 80 years. And are those going to work if you can't get the gas out of the ground or if the coal pile is frozen up? So in some instances, I don't know that there is a perfect solution. And these folks have a difficult job because they've got to figure out how much to invest to give you as much resiliency and reliability as they can, but not give you so much that you can't afford your electric bill. And so it's a fine balance. And so looking at investments going forward, how do you fit all that into the system? In terms of looking at a more resilient grid of the future, how do you balance resilience, reliability with the cost that it takes to get? I've heard people say, well, let's just bury all the high voltage power lines. People would not be able to afford, businesses would not be able to afford their electric bill if we did that, right? So how do you balance, and what do we do to try to harden and strengthen the grid of the future?
I think your point about the balance is exactly right. You talked about the winter storm Uri. It's not lost on those in this room that were here during that time. It was a lot colder than it was in Texas. We had more precipitation than we had in Texas, and the wind speeds were up, to kind of affect some of those lines. And we had nothing compared to what Texas had. So, there was resiliency, there was reliability there. But, as you look forward, the investments, I think, Mike used the word balance. One size doesn't fit all. The solution is not transmission. The solution is not storage. The solution is not natural gas. The solution is not underground. There's applications for all of those things. And you need to be very targeted about where you do those to make sure there's a return on those investments. I think the other thing that's very important is, I'm bullish on technology, and technology is getting better and better and better. And being on the cusp of those breakthroughs, I think, is critically important. But I think the real game changer beyond technology is really the ability to kind of capture this data, analyze this data, and really address system issues before they actually occur, and to prevent those vulnerabilities on the system.
Peggy,
Go ahead.
Well, I can think of two things from perspective of Enel. The one is, so I talked about storage. Right now we're installing the 2 hour. We're working and we're very, very bullish. Technology costs going down and being able to see longer term storage. It could be lithium mine or it could be other technologies. So that's something that we focus a lot because obviously it supports our general business plan. And I'm sure that once this becomes, let's say, available commercially, it will definitely be a support for the entire system. The other thing I'm thinking of is what I mentioned from the outset, which is the part of why another business line is business inside Enel, which is demand response. Demand response is a very powerful tool. If you think about it, I'm going to use a utility as if I can use jargon, probably it's outdated because I remember it from my early days, the value of lost load, right? What demand response does is basically asking each consumer, what is your value of lost load? right? So it doesn't have to be one person or one commission thinking what that is. Each consumer basically puts his own value or goes low. And he says, look, you can cut my power if you pay $1,000, right? Just saying a number. If you have this installed and available for all the population and all the consumers, you already have something that you don't need to invest anything. Obviously, you have to pay for it when you need it, but it's exactly that. You don't invest anything and you pay for it when you need it. So I would say this is a tool that could be deployed massively to add to the resiliency of the grid in an indirect way.
And I would add it, I do think it is an all of the above approach. It's not one single thing. And speaking of, we have a lot of the customers similar to the approach that George was talking about. So that's one thing. I would also, Mike was talking about during the February event and what happened with some of the wind farms. I know our wind farm that's coming online, it wasn't online at that time. It has a winterization package. So it's going to be able or expected to be able to run during some of those temperatures and times. So that's another thing that can be considered as well. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to focusing on starting to plan and have more scenarios to take into account some of these situations that we have been experiencing, some more coordination, and thinking that it's an all of the above approach, and there's not one single bullet that's going to solve this.
Peggy makes a good point, which reminded me that FERC and NERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and North American Electric Reliability Corporation, both of which audit us, all of us. They're coming out with a winter weather report, I believe, in September, and there's probably going to be some requirements for winterization on a lot of things going forward, and of course that will come with a price tag as well. But it was a very rare event. I mean, running the grid for 14 states, there's days when it's 78 degrees in Shreveport, Louisiana, minus 20 in Bismarck, North Dakota, and that's actually a good thing in terms of balancing the resources in the grid. For 3 days in February, it was at or below zero in all 14 states. That was just, it was an historic event. The question is history going to repeat itself? And the events we've been seeing recently, I suspect we're going to see more and more of those going forward, Sean mentioned. So from the audience, President Biden is pressing for regulation to force a carbon-free grid by 2035. Do any of the market participants believe this is feasible? Is it dangerous? Who wants to go first?
Well, I think it's exactly where the industry is, right? I mean, so as you look at our company and others up here, we're all moving down that path. At the end of the day, talked about our ability to provide reliability, resiliency, responsiveness to the needs, wants, and our customers is wrapped in affordability. And so, where we are today, from a technology standpoint, we see the opportunity to use gas as that bridge. In our jurisdictions, we think that's a competitive advantage to figure out how we're going to use hydrogen in that future. Long duration storage, as George is talking about, that's dispatchable, that would be invaluable. We're working on that. There's a lot of economics there. The reality is, the country is diverse. And what is economically feasible in some states isn't economically feasible in other states. And, you've got to make that balance there. George talks about being responsive. The opportunity for customers to make decisions on how they're going to use electricity is another toolkit. Compounding that, though, is, I want everybody to think through this, is we are going to see more electrification in terms of vehicles. And so what's going to happen if you think about your residential neighborhood? Typically, people go to work and they come home and eventually they go to bed and you see demand for death. Mike sees that at the pool. Going forward, as we see more and more vehicles, I just saw an announcement from Ford today that they think 40% of their vehicles by 2030 will be electric. As those vehicles come online and people come home and charge those vehicles in, you're going to see that load continue for a longer period, longer hours in the evening. What that's going to do is that residential neighborhood is going to look a whole lot like your commercial customers, your grocery store that has refrigeration units and things like that. So that's going to change how we generate, how we dispatch electricity as well. So, I think the answer is, could you do that by 2030? I think what we just saw in February, Mike, is pretty challenging in terms of getting there by 2030.
You want to jump in on that?
Well, I agree. First of all, I agree that the world is going towards that direction. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It wasn't 2030 or 2035. 2030. It gives us an extra 5 years charm. Well, I think if I recall, we've done some math when this was announced, and I think it's feasible if you think about it, because it represents something like twice as much of additions of new solar producing capacity compared to what happened last year. So twice as much every year compared to what happened last year. It doesn't sound something enormous, right? Now, as Sean said, clearly it's something that would need, you cannot deploy it, across the board in this thing. Some states will be faster, some states will be slower. There's going to be inertia for sure. There's politics involved. We have to be clear. There has to be a transition, let's say, a holistic approach to this transition, and we support that 100%. So I think if we put all our minds together and we say that this is the target, and we all agree, I think it's feasible. The challenge is to do the former, like to get everybody together and say that we agree, and say that we want to do that. But for sure, eventually this will happen. As I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of
More to add.
I don't know how you get there without large scale utility storage. We don't have that today. It's coming, but storage today, and I think it gets here rather quickly, but today, it kind of reminds me of my first cell phone. It was a 3.5 pound backbone, and I put a magnetic antenna on the road, and I stopped on top of the hill and make a call. But I do think we will see large scale storage, and it makes sense because the wind blows the most at night, and we're curtailing thousands of megawatts. When we set these North American wind records, we're doing that while curtailing 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts of wind. If you can curtail that into storage and then call on it during peak the next day, it makes a lot of sense. Let's get
I was just going to add, I think it's a great opportunity for technology to continue to prove what it's able to do. And I think whether that's with hydrogen or if it's with advancing and lowering the cost of storage so it's more feasible and applicable, I think that's what really drives.
So there's a couple here related to capacity markets, and they think SPP has a capacity market. We do not. We haven't needed one. We've got excess capacity, and we also, our entire region is vertically integrated, not deregulated, so there's no need. But they're asking about the need to include a retail capacity market. Any thoughts on that? I'm not.
Well, that sounds like the nice response to me. If I read that correctly, the first way.
Distributed energy and response.
Aggregation or something.
All right. In your analysis, what was the greatest problem in Texas last winter? What role did deregulation play?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's easy to point a lot of fingers at this, but, I think the difference between Texas and, like your 14-state region, specifically in areas that we serve, is there's no incentive to be reliable and resilient. Whether it was on the generation side, whether it was on the transmission side, whether it was on the distribution side. And, Peggy and I run businesses here that live and work here. And so when the storm came in, we were ready. And we had to respond to that. Because that's what you're held accountable. That's your responsibility. And, what you saw in Texas was a lot of at the end of the day, Mike, I think there's just a lot of finger pointing. There's probably plenty of money to go around.
I would agree with Sean. The question is, were there incentives there for people to show up to respond as they needed to is one. I think was there the opportunity for imports to come into the system, and was that for transfer capability? Did that exist, and was that working? So I think that I do want to say that Mike and SVP did a great job in how SVP worked with utilities in responding to the February event. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I understand that, you know, Texas have been a bit more, let's say, interconnected with other parts of the United States that would have perhaps helped or surely helped. I understand, I've seen the analysis. Obviously, we have power plants in Texas. We understand that there was some major problems in the fuel supply for gas supplies. I understand that it was what we discussed before about these events, you know, these rare events becoming not so rare, and us basically realizing that this is some, you know, this kind of cold spell usually would stop a couple of states north of Texas, right? This time it did. It went all the way to east. So it's something that, you know, tells us what we need to expect as not so unexpected in years to come. And I think, like, not being 100% prepared for something that you've never seen, it's something that, you know, if it happens once, it's a good lesson. We just need to make sure it doesn't happen.
Good questions from the audience. Thank you for your participation. And I've got 2:31. We're supposed to stop at 2:30. And so thank you for inviting us to be a part of the panel today. Thank you all for coming.